A man had just gotten home from work when he saw that his sister had collapsed with a fever. Just as he was about to take her to the hospital, he received a call that could change his life. The call was from his girlfriend, Jae-hee, who sounded very distressed. Hearing her panic, he left his sick sister behind and rushed to Jae-hee's location. Soon, the man arrived at a hotel. When he opened the door, he was shocked to see a stranger lying on the ground and Jae-hee cowering in the corner, trembling. It was clear that Jae-hee had gotten into a fight with the man, and in the struggle, she had severely injured him. The man checked the stranger's pulse and realized he was no longer breathing. This made Jae-hee even more terrified, and she kept insisting she didn't kill him. But the man saw the glass bottle in her hand and told her to turn herself in to the police. However, Jae-hee was worried that confessing would ruin her future. In a panic, she picked up a shard of glass, threatening to end things, clearly putting on a show for the man. Not wanting to see her so upset, the man made a decision that he would regret for the rest of his life. He wiped away all traces of Jae-hee's presence from the room. It was obvious that he was going to take the blame for the murder to protect her. He urged her to leave the scene quickly, but little did he know that as soon as she left, Jae-hee went straight to another man, hugging him for comfort after the ordeal. Meanwhile, the man foolishly replayed the words Jae-hee had left him with. The police soon arrived at the hotel, and the man had to face the consequences of his choice. He not only abandoned his sick sister but also threw away his lifelong dream of becoming a doctor. Before this incident, he had been a very talented doctor, but now his career had ended in such a tragic way. 6 years later, Jae-hee had married into a wealthy family the older man who had been involved that night. She even had a son with him, but things were not as smooth as she had hoped. The older man also had a daughter, Yoon-ji, who was only a few years younger than Jae-hee. Yoon-ji never accepted Jae-hee as her stepmother, and she didn't even care for Jae-hee's son. Yoon-ji was well aware that Jae-hee had married her father with ulterior motives, assuming she was only after the family inheritance. Yoon-ji openly exposed Jae-hee's scheme and left with the attitude of a spoiled young lady. Meanwhile, the man had been sentenced to 5 years and was now released. After spending a year abroad following his release, Ma-ru was on a flight back home when a woman suddenly collapsed on him. At first he thought she was flirting with him because of his average good looks, but when he saw her pale face he realized the truth. The woman had fainted because of an illness, and it turned out she was Yoon-ji, the female lead who already had a pre-existing condition. This time, an acute relapse had caused her to faint due to high blood pressure. Luckily, Ma-ru had been a brilliant doctor 6 years ago. Before attempting to save her, Ma-ru needed consent from her guardian. He asked the staff where her family was, and that's when Yoon-ji's stepmother, Jae-hee, walked over. She didn't seem concerned about Yoon-ji's well-being. Ma-ru was stunned when he saw the guardian. It was his ex-girlfriend. Yoon-ji also mentioned that the patient was her husband's daughter. This revelation left Ma-ru in despair, but what shocked him even more was seeing Jae-hee with a 5-year-old son. Ma-ru finally realized he had been nothing but a substitute all along. Just as Ma-ru was about to start the rescue, Jae-hee stopped him, claiming that he wasn't a doctor anymore, preventing him from saving Yoon-ji during the critical moment. It was clear that Jae-hee didn't want Yoon-ji to survive. Her motives were clear. If Yoon-ji died unexpectedly on the plane, Jae-hee would become the sole heir to the family fortune. It was the most shameless stepmother Ma-ru had ever seen. As Yoon-ji's condition worsened, Ma-ru ignored Jae-hee's interference and rushed to save her. Jae-hee was clearly anxious, but only because she feared Yoon-ji would survive. Yoon-ji's blood pressure and pulse finally stabilized. The flight was set to land in 10 minutes, and seeing that Yoon-ji was now out of danger, Ma-ru could finally relax. Ma-ru left the scene without saying a word, leaving Jae-hee standing there looking disappointed. Perhaps she was blaming her ex-boyfriend for ruining her plans. After getting off the plane, Ma-ru couldn't help but see reminders everywhere of the happy times he had shared with his ex. It made him realize that the promises Jae-hee had made years ago were just empty words, and in the end, her loyalty couldn't stand up to the temptation of wealth. By now, Ma-ru knew full well that the Jae-hee who had changed would never come back, so he made up his mind to forget her. Meanwhile, Yoon-ji, who had just been saved, showed no gratitude. Instead, she scolded her staff, saying how dare her stepmother entrust her life to someone who wasn't even a doctor. Suddenly, Yoon-ji received a call from her staff informing her that her stepmother had just withdrawn 1 billion won from the company's account. Curious about where Jae-hee was taking the money, Yoon-ji ordered her staff to follow her, leading them to Ma-ru's house. At that moment, Ma-ru was spending time with his sister, Ki-hee, who still harbored resentment toward Jae-hee for what had happened 6 years ago. Although Ki-hee understood her brother's difficult situation, she still felt bitter that Ma-ru had gone to prison for 5 years for his ex-girlfriend. After venting her frustration, Kiki asked Ma-ru to take her home, and as they returned, Ma-ru's childhood friend, Jae-gil, handed him an envelope. When Ma-ru opened it, he found 1 billion won inside. It turned out to be Jae-hee's compensation to him, likely a way to ease her guilt, as she had recently learned that Ma-ru still had feelings for her. However, Ma-ru refused to accept the compensation and chased after Jae-hee with the check, but she had already left. The next day, Ma-ru went to the wealthy family's house and stuffed the 1 billion won back into the envelope at Jae-hee's door. Shortly after returning the money, he received a call from his sister, saying that the police had shown up at their home looking for him. When Ma-ru rushed home, he found out that someone had filed charges against him for threats and intimidation. To his shock, it was none other than his ex-girlfriend, Jae-hee. Ma-ru couldn't believe it. 6 years ago, he had gone to prison for 5 years to protect her, and now, instead of being grateful, Jae-hee had sued him for intimidation and threats. However, Ma-ru refused to plead guilty. No matter what the police asked, he kept invoking his right to remain silent, because he couldn't believe Jae-hee would treat him this way. That was until he heard Jae-hee herself reveal a secret, which was actually about Yoon Ji-ai. After returning home from delivering the 1 billion won, Jae-hee found Yoon Ji-ai waiting for her in the backyard. Yoon Ji-ai's purpose was clear. She wanted to confront Jae-hee about why she had withdrawn 1 billion won from the company and what her relationship was with the man on the plane who had saved her, and believed Jae-hee had hired the man as a hitman. Jae-hee knew she couldn't let Yoon Ji-ai find out that Ma-ru had once been her boyfriend, or Yoon Ji-ai would discover that Ma-ru had gone to prison on her behalf. So she lies, claiming that Ma-ru had blackmailed her and that the target of the blackmail was Yoon Ji-ai. Unexpectedly, Yoon Ji-ai also has a weakness in her stepmother's hands. It turns out that 7 years ago, Yoon Ji-ai was detained abroad on suspicion of possessing illegal substances. Jae-hee lied that Ma-ru knew about this too. That's why Ma-ru had blackmailed her into handing over 10 billion won. At this point, Yoon Ji-ai is aware that her stepmother is trying to use this incident to suppress her, but she dares not expose her stepmother directly. If other shareholders were to learn about this blemish, it would directly affect her chances of becoming her father's company's heir. So, Yoon Ji-ai chooses to stay silent. Yoon Ji-ai also has her own reasons for not speaking up. Back then, her ex-boyfriend had a criminal record, and he had desperately begged Yoon Ji-ai to take the blame for him, saying, "Since it's your first offense, you won't be severely punished." To Jae-hee's surprise, the next day Yoon Ji-ai actually filed a lawsuit against Ma-ru with the police. It seems that Jae-hee's trump card cannot control Yoon Ji-ai at all. Now the lies Jae-hee told to frame Ma-ru have backfired, leading to Ma-ru being taken to the police for blackmail. And sitting next to Jae-hee is the lawyer Yoon Ji-ai specifically sent. To avoid exposing her past relationship with Ma-ru, Jae-hee can only continue to pin the crime on Ma-ru. In the end, however, due to a lack of evidence, Ma-ru is released, as the authorities couldn't find the 10 billion won Ma-ru supposedly gave him. When Jae-hee returns home, the housekeeper approaches and hands her an envelope. Inside was the very 10 billion won she had given to Ma-ru. Luckily, Ma-ru returned the money in time, otherwise he would be facing another 9 years in prison. Although Ma-ru managed to escape the check fraud, he returned home to discover that trouble had arisen with his sister Ki. The neighbor informed Ma-ru about it, and soon he rushed to the hospital, where he found his sister still unconscious on the bed. She had been injured twice already because of his ex-girlfriend, making Ma-ru feel even more guilty. At this point, Ma-ru no longer had any compassion left for his ex-girlfriend, but seeking revenge on a wealthy woman was no easy task. He then shifted his focus to Yoon Ji-ai, the heiress of the Taesin group, and started learning more about her personality. Knowing that Yoon Ji-ai had no friends, Ma-ru decided to become her first friend. He also learned that her biggest passion was off-road motorcycling. Using his excellent driving skills, he successfully caught Yoon Ji-ai's attention, but that was only part of his plan. He had already tampered with her motorcycle. As expected, while making a turn, Yoon Ji-ai's motorcycle suddenly went out of control, sliding off a cliff. Ma-ru, following his plan, pretended to pass by chance and rescued Yoon Ji-ai. He thought that this would earn Yoon Ji-ai's trust, but instead Yoon Ji-ai cried, wanting to go back and retrieve her motorcycle, as it held memories of her mother. Seeing this, Ma-ru raised the stakes and promised to retrieve the item for her. It turned out to be a pendant on the motorcycle. Just as Ma-ru retrieved the pendant and prepared to return, the rope he was using to climb back up suddenly snapped. In that moment, Ma-ru realized he had taken too big of a risk. When he woke up the next morning, he was lying in a hospital bed, bruised and injured. Yoon Ji-ai was sitting beside him, which signaled to Ma-ru that his plan had partially succeeded. However, Yoon Ji-ai didn't seem particularly moved. Instead, she thought his actions were foolish. but deep down Yoon Ji-I was touched. To her, Ma-ru was the only person, aside from her late mother, who was willing to risk his life for her. Knowing human weakness as well, Ma-ru realized it wasn't the right time to completely win her over just yet. He needed to make her fall for him completely. So, he coldly dismissed her, telling her to leave. This tactic worked perfectly, as Yoon Ji-I gradually began to feel guilty for Ma-ru's injuries. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw the image of Ma-ru risking his life to save her. Later, when Yoon Ji-I returned home, she joined her family for dinner. During the meal, she expressed her desire to donate part of her liver to her gravely ill father, but her father scolded her for the suggestion. Her young stepmother, Jae-hee, observed this with a peculiar glint in her eye, though Yoon Ji-I couldn't quite understand what her stepmother's intentions were. Despite the cold response, her words eventually moved her wealthy father. Yoon Ji-I, gradually falling for him, sought him out herself, but Ma-ru continued to play it cool, maintaining his distance. His strategy of playing hard to get was working. Yoon Ji-I was becoming more interested by him. Despite her wealth and status, Ma-ru consistently rejected her gifts, even refusing a luxury watch. This made her increasingly curious about him. While Yoon Ji-I was drawn deeper into Ma-ru's emotional trap, Ma-ru's mind was still set on avenging his first love. Though he had caught Yoon Ji-I's attention, he wanted more. When Yoon Ji-I finally confronted Ma-ru, asking what he truly wanted, his answer was not clear, filled with both a hint of affection and revenge. Before parting, Ma-ru asked Yoon Ji-I to leave him alone, revealing that he was there to take his sister Kiki back. Kiki had returned to a toxic family environment to avoid being a burden on her brother, living with a couple constantly fighting. When Ma-ru arrived, the husband was beating his wife and Ma-ru intervened, only to be met with the wife's ungrateful attitude. Fortunately, Kiki appeared and stopped her mother. Seeing how the stepmother treated Kiki as a disposable object, Ma-ru had had enough and took his sister away. Yoon-ji, witnessing Ma-ru's protective nature toward his sister, was deeply moved by his sense of responsibility. Together, the three of them drove away. Meanwhile, Jae-hee had other plans. She declined her husband's offer to transfer valuable assets to her because she had much bigger ambitions. She wanted to take over the entire Taishan group. To win over lawyer Jin's trust, Jae-hee confessed everything she had done, including how her ex-boyfriend, Ma-ru, had gone to prison for a murder she committed. Jin, seduced by the potential rewards, decided to take the risk and join her in this scheme. However, Jae-hee's husband woke up in the middle of the night to find his wife missing. Sensing something was wrong, at the same time, Ma-ru drove Yoon Ji-I home and stumbled upon Jae-hee's affair with the lawyer. Seeing the chaotic state of his ex-girlfriend's life, Ma-ru's desire for revenge grew even stronger. He seized the moment to flaunt his affection for Yoon Ji-I right in front of Jae-hee, successfully provoking her. Even though Jae-hee had married into a wealthy family, she couldn't handle seeing her ex-boyfriend Ma-ru getting closer to Yoon Ji-I. She tried to sow discord between them, but Yoon Ji-I, a proud and headstrong heiress, wasn't easily swayed by Jae-hee's words. At the same time, the chairman of the family was also starting to have doubts about whether he could trust his much younger wife, Jae-hee, especially after she didn't return home the previous night. He turned to lawyer Jin for answers, but by this time, Jin had already been bribed by Jae-hee and naturally sided with her. Hearing Jin's high praise for Jae-hee, the chairman's suspicions were eased, and he stopped questioning her. Meanwhile, Ma-ru continued to provoke Jae-hee by being close to Yoon Ji-I but avoided revealing their past relationship. Instead, he awkwardly told Yoon Ji-I that he was a fan of Jae-hee when they were in school. The situation became tense, and just as things were getting awkward, the chairman arrived. Seeing Ma-ru next to his daughter, the chairman was immediately suspicious. He questioned Ma-ru but, to his dismay, noticed that his daughter was defending Ma-ru, so he reluctantly organized a formal dinner to get to know him. During the dinner, the chairman remained suspicious of Ma-ru, believing that anyone who approached his daughter was likely after her money. His focus on Ma-ru was so intense that he didn't notice his wife, Jae-hee, exchanging flirtatious glances with lawyer Jin right at the table. As the chairman asked Ma-ru about his past, Ma-ru openly admitted that he hadn't graduated from university. This only made the chairman more determined to press for more details, especially about why Ma-ru dropped out. Ma-ru glanced at Jae-hee, who was visibly shaking with fear, but he chose not to reveal their secret past, instead saying he didn't want to talk about it. This response angered the chairman, but before he could react further, Yoon Ji-I, being straightforward and bold, shifted the conversation to criticize her father for marrying a woman 5 years older than her. She mockingly asked if it was really because of love. The chairman was caught off guard by his daughter's boldness and was so furious he couldn't speak. Feeling humiliated, the chairman ordered Jae-hee to deal with Ma-ru. Once the chairman left the room, Jae-hee collapsed into her chair, overcome with the stress of the situation. Jae-hee, confused and unsure, she wonders if she should return to her former life as a commoner, but what she doesn't realize is that Ma-ru's plan is to remind her of the time he spent suffering in prison because of her. Despite successfully winning the affection of Yoon Ji-ai, Ma-ru is still haunted by his past and Jae-hee's betrayal. To make matters worse, Yoon Ji-ai's father disapproves of their relationship and demands they break up, influenced by his distrust of Ma-ru's intentions. However, for someone as skilled in manipulation as Ma-ru, winning Yoon Ji-ai back is an easy task. His efforts pay off, and soon enough Yoon Ji-ai is deeply in love with him again, abandoning any thoughts of breaking up and eagerly awaiting their next meeting. In the midst of this, the company faces financial difficulties and decides to sell a valuable resort in Japan. This causes Yoon Ji-ai great distress, since the resort was her late mother's pride and joy. Desperate to stop the sale, she flies to Japan, but feels utterly alone in her efforts. In her loneliness, she reaches out to Ma-ru for support. During the call, Ma-ru overhears a shocking conversation between two women, which further opens his eyes to Jae-hee's deceitful nature. Determined to help, Ma-ru decides to fly to Japan that very night to assist Yoon Ji-ai. Normally, Yoon Ji-ai would have been furious at him for showing up unannounced, but seeing him in a foreign country makes her forget all her worries. Together they work to prevent the sale of the resort. Ma-ru uses his knowledge of the business to prepare a report, and even files an injunction on Yoon Ji-ai's behalf. However, by the time they reach the company, the sale has already been finalized. Jae-hee shows her true colors by slapping her in public, shocking both Yoon Ji-ai and everyone present. Mental health. Just as Yoon Ji-ai is about to leave the scene in despair, she receives a phone call from Ma-ru. She assumes it's just a comforting call, but Ma-ru has a plan. He instructs Yoon Ji-ai to hand the phone to Richard and put it on speaker. Ma-ru then exposes the truth about Richard, revealing that his wealth was built on harmful chemicals. Everyone that she never cared about the contract but only wanted to save the resort. Jae-hee, caught off guard, realizes that her elaborate plan has failed, not because of luck but because she underestimated Ma-ru, her former lover. After everything, Ma-ru wastes no time and asks Yoon Ji-ai out on a date, to which she excitedly agrees. They plan to meet at the resort's park, and Yoon Ji-ai is over the moon, completely captivated by Ma-ru's actions and character. However, their conversation is overheard by Jae-hee, who listens to every word from outside the door. Realizing that Yoon Ji-ai's victory wasn't a fluke, Jae-hee acknowledges that Ma-ru is no longer the man she once knew. Determined to gain the upper hand, Jae-hee calls Ma-ru herself, and to her surprise Ma-ru agrees to meet her. She tries to use the past against Ma-ru. Jae-hee realizes that her attempts to manipulate Ma-ru using their past relationship have failed miserably. Desperate, she resorts to extreme measures, attempting to no idea that he is engaged in a life-or-death situation with his ex. After successfully reviving Jae-hee, however, once she wakes, Jae-hee immediately reverts to her manipulative ways, trying to establish contact with him again. Ma-ru, now disillusioned and wary of her true nature, refuses to entertain her attempts and leaves the room, realizing he needs to return to Yoon Ji-ai. As he rushes to the resort's park, he remembers that Yoon Ji-ai has been waiting for him all day. When he arrives, he finds her looking delay. She embraces him warmly. After the kiss, the two held hands and walked to a busy street. They officially accepted each other, but in an instant, Yoon Ji-ai realized that Ma-ru suddenly disappeared from her side. While Yoon Ji was searching for him everywhere, Ma-ru stood in a corner watching her. It turns out that Ma-ru approached Yoon Ji-ai with another motive. He successfully got close to the daughter of a wealthy man, but this also caused Han Jae-hee to feel dissatisfied and determined to ruin their relationship. Jae-hee used their past relationship as a way to try and reconcile with Ma-ru, but it was all part of her plan. She had already informed Ma-ru's girlfriend, aiming to cause a misunderstanding between them. However, Yoon Ji-ai didn't go directly to Ma-ru's workplace. She went to his house instead. Just as she arrived at the front door, she witnessed an unprecedented professional breakdancing performance. Then, Jegal took Yoon Ji-ai to Ma-ru's workplace. Jae-hee shamelessly claimed she still loved Ma-ru. Faced with his deceitful ex, Ma-ru no longer wanted to believe her. At this moment, Ma-ru received a message from his friend Yoon Ji-ai was about to arrive. Worried about the misunderstanding, Ma-ru prepared to leave, but Jae-hee, who had meticulously planned this scheme, wasn't going to let him leave easily. Her tactics were beyond shameless. As Ma-ru expected, this woman hadn't changed at all, but Ma-ru still kissed her, Just as Jae-hee was triumphantly thinking her plan had worked, Ma-ru suddenly took out his phone and recorded the entire scene. Now it was Ma-ru's turn to fight back. Furious that her plan failed, Jae-hee angrily smashed Ma-ru's phone. The two began to hurt each other, marking the beginning of a battle between them. But when Jae-hee was about to leave, it showed that Ma-ru hadn't fully let go of her. At the same time, Yoon-ji received a photo downstairs. It was a picture of Jae-hee kissing attorney Kim. This woman had betrayed her own father. At that moment, Yoon-ji no longer cared about Ma-ru upstairs and hurried to find the Jun-hae, her secretary. It turned out that Jun-hae had long known about the affair between the two, but due to the chairman's health, he had kept quiet. At this point, all she wanted was someone to rely on. Unknowingly, she ended up at Ma-ru's place. Over the phone, Ma-ru sensed something was off with Yoon-ji. Just as he was about to go find her, he saw her drunk on his way home. Seeing the person she loved right in front of her, Yoon-ji was finally able to sleep peacefully. The next morning, they shared tender moments like a normal couple, expressing their love for each other. However, Yoon-ji has pressing business matters to attend to. Just as she prepares to leave, a neighbor hands her a shocking photo. It's of her stepmother Jae-hee with Ma-ru. Yoon-ji is left in disbelief, questioning her faith in the world around her. Through the investigation, Yoon-ji learns about Ma-ru's past, discovering that he and Jae-hee have known each other for 19 years, having once been inseparable. Yoon-ji feels betrayed and questions Ma-ru's intentions. Jae-hee, with ulterior motives, offers to help Yoon-ji confront Ma-ru, suggesting that he could make Ma-ru disappear if necessary. This suggestion deeply impacts Yoon-ji, who, despite knowing Ma-ru's history, refuses to give up on him as he represents her only source of comfort. Meanwhile, the chairman noticed that his daughter hadn't returned home for several days, so he asked Jae-hee to go to Ma-ru's place to find her. But Jae-hee, remembering how they had already torn apart their relationship, began to encourage the chairman to send some thugs instead. At this time, Yoon-ji was preparing to confess to Ma-ru. After learning about his connection with Jae-hee, Yoon-ji had made up her mind to break up with Ma-ru. As she predicted, Ma-ru didn't try to stop her. Yoon-ji tried to stay calm and hold back her tears in front of Ma-ru, but on her way home she fainted. Coincidentally, it was Jae-hee who found her while she was searching for Ma-ru. On the other side, Ma-ru was suddenly attacked by a group of men armed with weapons and was knocked unconscious from behind, yet the attackers didn't stop. Soon, Ma-ru was beaten bloody and badly injured. The thugs revealed their reason for attacking him, and Ma-ru instantly understood it was the woman he had always loved who sent them. Meanwhile, the unconscious Yoon-ji was brought back home by Jae-hee. When Yoon-ji woke up, she was extremely worried about Ma-ru, as she vaguely overheard the conversation between Ma-ru and Jae-hee while she was unconscious. Just as she was about to leave to find Ma-ru, she discovered that someone had locked the door from the outside. How crazy can loving someone make you? Even after being betrayed by her boyfriend, Yoon-ji still ran barefoot to Ma-ru's house in the middle of the night, despite having a high fever. But it was so late that no one noticed her presence. The long fever left her feeling weak, and just as she was about to leave, Ma-ru, injured, opened the door. Seeing the person she loved right in front of her, all of Yoon-ji's grudges were released at that moment. Her greatest wish was now to see Ma-ru every day. Ma-ru was deeply moved by her sincerity, and Yoon-ji was no longer just a tool for his revenge in his eyes. However, fate wasn't kind. Just as the two embraced tightly, Jae-hee quietly appeared behind them. It turned out that Jae-hee had learned that Ma-ru had been secretly protecting her despite everything. Feeling guilty, she had come to apologize, only to witness their intimate moment. Ma-ru noticed Jae-hee standing behind them, but instead of love, his eyes were now filled with the burning fire of revenge. But Jae-hee was never someone to give up easily. At that moment, her mind was consumed with a single thought: Ma-ru is mine. She called Ma-ru, saying, "My brother is going to kill me," and deliberately shattered a vase to create a tense atmosphere. Stay silent, and knowing Ma-ru's personality, he definitely won't be able to just let it go. Sure enough, as soon as Ma-ru hung up the phone, he immediately drove to Jae-hee's place. His actions showed that he hadn't completely moved on. Meanwhile, Jae-hee, after hanging up, quickly dropped her pitiful expression, replacing it with a cold, indifferent look. She had already anticipated that Ma-ru would be on his way, so she sent her location to Yoon-ji. First, she pretended to be helpless to get her ex-boyfriend to come find her, but then in the next moment she sent her location to his current girlfriend, clearly trying to break them apart. Ma-ru, who was in a rush, soon arrived at the apartment. The moment he saw Jae-hee, he felt as if he had been transported back to their school days. Jae-hee looked at him with a weak expression, and Ma-ru, feeling sorry for her, asked, "Where's the person who hit you?" Jae-hee quickly blamed it on her brother. Hearing this explanation, Ma-ru didn't doubt her. After all, her brother had just been released from prison. But just then, coincidentally, Jae-hee's brother called Ma-ru, and through their conversation, Ma-ru learned that her brother wasn't even in the city. Once again, Ma-ru had been fooled by Jae-hee's pity act. Despite this, out of a sense of responsibility as a man, Ma-ru still helped bandage Jae-hee's wounds. Little did he know Jae-hee had more plans to ensure her scheme worked, as she had calculated that Yoon Ji-I would soon arrive. Yoon Ji-I witnessed everything and decided to break up with Ma-ru. This moment revealed just how dangerous Jae-hee could be. Jae-hee's desire for success only grew stronger. She had sacrificed too much to get where she was. However, what she didn't know was that the chairman had already sent people to investigate and had discovered her relationship with lawyer Kim. The chairman's health was deteriorating day by day, and he feared that his company would fall into Jae-hee's hands. So in his remaining time, he planned to transfer all his assets to his daughter. Just as he was discussing this with his lawyer, Jae-hee entered the room. At that moment, the chairman was unaware of Jae-hee's true intentions and instinctively expressed concern for his wife, asking, "What happened to your face?" Jae-hee didn't respond, but instead coldly placed the criminal record on the table. The chairman immediately sensed something was wrong, and when he opened the file, it was exactly the evidence he had always feared would be leaked. Jae-hee's intentions were clear. She was holding this evidence over him, waiting to see how he would react. The chairman, in disbelief, stared at Jae-hee, unable to understand why she would do this to him. Jae-hee didn't hold back, revealing all the grievances she had endured over the years. Faced with Jae-hee's verbal assault, the already sick chairman suddenly fell ill and reached for his special medication on the table. Jae-hee didn't rush to help. It wasn't until the bottle rolled to her feet that she slowly picked it up. Yet even then, she didn't stop threatening the chairman. But the chairman could no longer hold on and collapsed. Jae-hee hadn't expected things to go this far. Feeling a pain of guilt, she was about to call for emergency help when lawyer Kim arrived and stopped her. His goal was clear: they needed the chairman to disappear to seize the fortune. However, their conversation was overheard by Jun-hee, who had been listening on the other end of the phone. Jun-hee had already recorded the conversation, planning to hand it over to the police. But lawyer Kim was one step ahead. He held incriminating evidence against Jun-hee. It turned out that the death of the chairman's first wife was caused by Jun-hee's father. If Jun-hee exposed them, lawyer Kim would retaliate by implicating Jun-hee's father in the crime. Knowing this, Jun-hee had no choice but to bury the truth deep in his heart. Instead, he sent a message to Yoon Ji-I, informing her of her father's death. At the time, Yoon Ji-I had just gone through a breakup, and the sudden news of her father's passing left her devastated. A year quickly passed. By this time, Ma-ru had completely transformed, with no trace of his former warmth. Yoon Ji-I had mysteriously disappeared a year ago. Jae-hee, on the other hand, had smoothly taken control of most of the group. But she remains a mere puppet. Even clients do not recognize her authority and mock her for her rise to power through manipulation. After Yoon Ji-I's disappearance a year ago, Ma-ru has fallen into a deep depression. He can't shake the image of her from his mind. All he wants is to raise money for his sister's medical treatment before vanishing from the world alongside Yoon Ji-I. His only ally during this dark time is his concerned friend, who is surprised by the drastic changes in Ma-ru's behavior, wondering how a once stable person could deteriorate so quickly. The only person who might save Ma-ru is Yoon Ji. Meanwhile, Jae-hee is also searching for Yoon Ji-I, knowing that the rightful inheritance of the company rests with her. A year has passed with no news of Yoon Ji-I, and as long as she remains missing, Jae-hee will never truly be in charge of Taishan Group, remaining merely as the chairperson. Determined, Jae-hee begins to clear out Yoon Ji-I's belongings while plotting her next move. As Ma-ru continues his search for Yoon Ji-I, a year has passed since they were separated. Despite his efforts, it's as if Yoon Ji-I has vanished without a trace. At this moment, the distance between him and Yoon Ji-I was no more than 100 meters. A girl dressed in white was squatting by the roadside, playing with children. The chalk in her hand was drawing the figure of a man, and then she wrote 3 large characters beside it: Ru Ma. These were the 3 characters that left the deepest impression on her. Apart from that, she had lost all memories of herself. The children beside her were still teasing the girl, saying she even got the characters wrong. Following this familiar voice, Ma-ru looked over and couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him was the lover he had longed for day and night. Then a pair of large hands appeared, helping Yoon Ji-I correct the characters. Upon seeing Ma-ru's face, Yoon Ji-I instinctively spoke his name. She then took out a camera from her bag, filled with photos of her and Ma-ru together. This was the only thing she remembered. Tears uncontrollably streamed down her face. Yoon Ji-I later finds herself in Ma-ru's small courtyard, were the surroundings with a sense of comfort and familiarity. As she begins to piece together her lost memories, it isn't until her assistant reveals the truth that she learns the full extent of her situation a year ago. Yoon Ji-I was in a car accident that not only caused her to lose her memory, but also altered her personality. To protect her from Jae-hee's schemes, her assistant had hidden her away. The assistant informs Ma-ru that the chairman's death was definitely not an accident and is likely linked to Jae-hee's doings. However, Ma-ru, hesitant and burdened by the weight of the past, remains silent and moves closer to Yoon Ji-I. As tensions rise, Jae-hee's brother arrives, making Ma-ru instantly get suspicious of his intentions. He turns Yoon Ji-I's head away and embraces her tightly, fearful that Jae-hee's brother might see her. This protective gesture exposes Ma-ru's true feelings toward Yoon Ji-I. Next day, this girl, once the envy of many and now a victim of her circumstances, finds herself deceived by Jae-hee's brother, who claims he can lead her to the man in her photos. Naively, Yoon Ji-I rushes to change into her favorite outfit, blissfully unaware that the man in front of her plans to trade her for profit. To prevent any complications, Jae-hee's brother forces Yoon Ji-I to drink a special concoction, causing her to lose consciousness. Meanwhile, Yoon Ji-I's assistant realizes she is missing and immediately contacts Ma-ru. However, she is nowhere to be found. Suspecting that the henchman, Jae-hee's brother, may be involved, the assistant remembers that Yoon Ji-I's phone is equipped with a tracking device. Ma-ru grabbed the phone and setting off to find her. Jae-hee's brother remains unaware of Ma-ru's pursuit, dreaming of the wealth he hopes to gain. When Ma-ru arrives, he begins searching for any sign of Yoon Ji-I. In a moment, as he turns, he spots a car speeding away with Yoon Ji-I inside. Rather than panic, a sense of determination washes over him. He knows he is faster than any vehicle on the road. Moments later, Ma-ru intercepts the Jae-hee's brother. Meanwhile, Ma-ru is overwhelmed with rage as he realizes his girlfriend has been abducted. He seizes the man, demanding to know the mastermind behind the abduction. However, the naive Yoon Ji-I intervenes, stopping him from pursuing Jae-hee's brother and causing him to flee. In a fit of anger, Ma-ru lashes out at Yoon Ji-I, expressing his frustration. Yet his words cut deep, triggering her insecurities. Yoon Ji-I now feels rejected by the very person she loves. In a moment, she refuses to return with Ma-ru, overwhelmed by the emotions. Ma-ru's intentions were solely to protect Yoon Ji-I by keeping her whereabouts hidden from those at the group, who are actively searching for her. He suddenly realizes that if he can restore Yoon Ji-I's memories, she will be safe from harm. However, Jae-hee, now more dangerous than a year ago, is on the hunt for Yoon Ji-I. She willing to betray even his own brother for financial gain. Meanwhile, Jae-hee's brother senses danger and contemplates joining forces with Ma-ru to deal with Jae-hee, but Jae-hee has already found Yoon Ji-I, and, along with her crew, just as they're about to enter, Jun-hee arrives to rescue her. While Jun-hee distracts Jae-hee's team, Ma-ru manages to reunite with Yoon Ji-I, chasing her away to safety. He devises a clever plan that not only counters Jae-hee but also protects Yoon Ji-I. However, Jae-hee convenes all board members to remove Yoon Ji-I of her position as the rightful heir of Taishan Group, arguing that the company cannot remain leaderless given her year-long disappearance. Despite most members agreeing with Jae-hee's motion, a few dissenting voices rise against her. Now, she is just one step away from complete control of Taishan Group. During the vote, some members mention that the true heir, Yoon Ji-I, is still alive, which means Ma-ru can only serve as the acting chairwoman. But Jae-hee was well prepared. She immediately began a passionate speech, claiming that the position of president of the company. This time, no one objected, and Jae-hee finally achieved her long-desired goal of controlling the entire group. Upon receiving this news, the lawyer, Jun-hee, hurriedly contacted Ma-ru, as he was now the only person who could help Yoon Ji-I. Meanwhile, on Jae-hee's side, after receiving small votes, she couldn't wait to hold her inauguration ceremony as the president and invited a large number of reporters to hype up her achievement. As Jae-hee was detailing her contributions to the company, two figures entered the venue. The moment Jae-hee saw that it was Yoon Ji-I, the very person she feared, her smile froze on her face, staring in disbelief, but she quickly regained her composure and began to put on an act, tightly hugging Yoon Ji-I. Yoon Ji-I then took to the stage and began recounting the year she had disappeared. From her appearance, no one could tell she was a girl who had lost her memory. But this was exactly the plan Ma-ru had come up with. All of Yoon Ji-I's lines had been prepared in advance to prevent any slip-ups. In front of the crowd, Yoon Ji-I introduced her fiancé, who had assisted her throughout, leaving Jae-hee shocked as her plans backfire. After leaving the venue, Yoon Ji-I was still in a daze, clearly overwhelmed by what had just happened. Ma-ru quickly pulled her into his arms and gently comforted her. Yoon-ji was puzzled, wondering why Ma-ru was so determined to fight her stepmother. But Ma-ru couldn't tell her the truth just yet. Everything he was doing was to protect her. Meanwhile, Jae-hee was deeply affected by Ma-ru's actions during the event. She had expected him to cause trouble, but as luck would have it, just as they exited the elevator, the three ran into each other again. Jae-hee, pretending to be gracious, invited the two to her home for dinner. Although Ma-ru was 100 times unwilling, he had no choice but to agree in order to prevent Yoon-ji from slipping up. But the moment they arrived at the house, something Yoon-ji said immediately raised Jae-hee's suspicions. She asks about her father. Sensing that Yoon-ji was close to revealing the truth, Ma-ru countered by saying that when the chairman passed away, Yoon-ji, his daughter, wasn't by his side. She suggested they visit the chairman's room, which served another purpose to get Yoon-ji out of the way. Once Yoon-ji left, the conversation between Ma-ru and Jae-hee became tense and filled with hidden meaning. Jae-hee asked Ma-ru why he had come back. Ma-ru didn't give much explanation, only saying that everything he was doing was for Yoon-ji and now his eyes were only on her. Ma-ru had once protected Jae-hee in the same way, which only deepened her heartbreak. On their way home, Yoon-ji begins to fear the process of regaining her memories. She decides to pursue her memories, focusing solely on her time with Ma-ru. As Ma-ru plans a date with Yoon-ji, he overhears her mention Jae-hee's arrival at the door. Instantly on guard, he rushes to Yoon-ji, aware that Jae-hee intends to persuade Yoon-ji to leave him and return home with her. Jae-hee's words trigger memories for Yoon-ji, making her recall past events. Jae-hee recounts how Ma-ru initially got together with Yoon-ji to exact revenge on her. This painful truth sends Yoon-ji reeling, causing her to collapse in distress. Meanwhile, Ma-ru witnesses this emotional breakdown and feels a mix of frustration and anger, especially as Jae-hee's taunts brought up old emotions. Jae-hee sees an opportunity. If she can gather evidence of Yoon-ji's amnesia, she could legally assume guardianship over her and gain control over the company's assets. Meanwhile, after a night of treatment, Yoon-ji shows signs of improvement, but when Ma-ru awakens, he discovers she has gone missing. He ultimately finds her in a nearby park, but to his dismay, Yoon-ji still cannot remember him. Ma-ru has no choice but to forcibly bring her back home and uses photographs to bring back her memory. However, this time, Yoon-ji's personality character change. She starts throwing things around, only to fall asleep a few minutes later. During this time, Jae-hee pays a visit, wanting to check on Yoon-ji, but Ma-ru blocks her at the door. Jae-hee believes that Ma-ru still has feelings for her and that Yoon-ji is merely a burden on him. Ma-ru's conflicted gaze reveals staying affection for Jae-hee, which complicates his relationship with Yoon-ji. On the way back, Jae-hee receives a call from lawyer Jin, who has obtained evidence of Yoon-ji's amnesia and is ready to act against her. Despite Yoon-ji's behavior, Ma-ru remains patient and tolerant, eventually discovering that Yoon-ji is not truly amnesiac but is intentionally avoiding memories related to him. This realization allows Yoon-ji to finally express her suppressed emotions, leading her to a breakdown. This revelation fuels her desire for vengeance, overshadowing her romantic feelings for Ma-ru. Yoon-ji dismisses gifts from him and tears out references to Ma-ru from her diary, viewing him as another betrayer. However, when they are together, her affection resurfaces, showing the conflict between her personal feelings and her thirst for revenge. Meanwhile, Jae-hee, having attained wealth and power, struggles with the loss of true love. Unbeknownst to her, Ma-ru is planning to marry Yoon-ji. Yet Yoon-ji's intentions are not genuine. Her every move is a calculated part of her revenge against Jae-hee, even involving her in wedding preparations. On the day of the wedding, chaos ensues when an anonymous reveals scandalous photos of Jae-hee and Ma-ru, which makes headlines just as Yoon-ji prepares to wed. This shocking truth that her fiancé was once involved with her stepmother threatens to stop the wedding. Unlike a typical reaction of shock and despair, Yoon-ji remains composed, knowing this is all part of her plan to exact revenge. As the wedding approaches, Yoon-ji waits for Ma-ru, who is mysteriously unreachable. Sensing that he may have figured out her true intentions, her intellect leads her to believe he might suspect her memory has returned. She remains anxious. Meanwhile, the chaos ensues when a journalist confronts Jae-hee about the scandal, and the situation spirals out of control as news spreads quickly despite attempts to contain it. This betrayal leaves everyone. The groom, Ma-ru, never showed up, and even his best friend started to suspect that Ma-ru had run away. It wasn't until the evening that Ma-ru finally appeared, but instead of giving a direct answer, he took Yoon-ji to the riverside. They needed to settle things once and for all. Meanwhile, Jun-hee heard from his assistant an unexpected piece of news that shocked everyone. Yoon Ji-ai herself had leaked the love triangle involving Ma-ru to the television station. Han Jae-hee had no choice but to temporarily hide out at lawyer Jin's house. Even though Ma-ru and Yoon Ji-ai's relationship had fallen apart, Ma-ru still wanted to clear the way for Yoon Ji-ai, so he took the blame for her in front of Jae-hee. Ma-ru then told Jae-hee that his love for her had never changed and that he only felt pity for Yoon Ji-ai. Everyone knew it was a lie, but Jae-hee took his words seriously and began to entertain the idea of continuing her relationship with Ma-ru. However, lawyer Jin wasn't going to let Ma-ru ruin his plans. He immediately arranged for his people to stop the news from spreading and ordered Jae-hee not to admit anything. It turned out that lawyer Jin had long been prepared. Although lawyer Jin covered everything for Jae-hee, he had his own agenda. In addition to gaining control of the company, he also wanted to possess Jae-hee and threaten her. Despite lawyer Jin's threats, she still took the risk to find Ma-ru, hoping to escape with him. Ma-ru didn't give her a direct answer but instead took the drunk Jae-hee home, a move that was witnessed by Yoon Ji-ai, who was coming downstairs. Even though Ma-ru and Yoon Ji-ai had already cut ties, Ma-ru's expression was still somewhat unnatural and his way of addressing Jae-hee had changed to president. Meanwhile, Yoon Ji-ai was still plotting her revenge. She sought out the lawyer, Jun-hee, trying to uncover the true cause of her father's death, which made Jun-hee visibly anxious. Her father's death had some connection to Jun-hee, and it seemed he had made up his mind about something. Jun-hee went alone to Ma-ru and handed over a recording that should have been destroyed. The recording revealed the entire process of how Jae-hee and lawyer Jin conspired to kill Chairman. With this recording, taking down lawyer Jin would be easy. However, Jun-hee feared for his own safety, so he gave Ma-ru a backup of the recording before heading to lawyer Jin's office. When Jun-hee presented the recording card, lawyer Jin was happy, but he didn't forget to threaten Jun-hee using his father's matter. Meanwhile, after repeatedly listening to the recording, Ma-ru began to feel that Jae-hee wasn't the real culprit and decided to give her a chance, advising her to confess in exchange for a lighter sentence. The two reminisced about their sweet past and embraced each other, crying. But all of this was seen by Yoon Ji-ai, who had followed them. Before her plan could be executed, Yoon Ji-ai received news that Jun-hee had been in a car accident. His injuries were severe, and he had fallen into a deep coma. Furious, Yoon Ji-ai blamed Ma-ru for hiding the truth from her and directed all her rage toward lawyer Jin and Jae-hee. Driven by suspicion, Yoon Ji-ai insists on searching Jae-hee's belongings, fearing that Jae-hee may be hiding something sinister. In a tense showdown, Yoon Ji-ai demands that Jae-hee remove her shirt before entering the hospital room. Jae-hee complies without hesitation, but just as she is about to remove her final piece of clothing, Ma-ru intervenes, effectively preventing Jae-hee from being humiliated. Concerned for her safety, Ma-ru begins to avoid Yoon Ji-ai, even showing up in her most private moments, such as brushing her teeth or using the restroom, waiting silently outside. This behavior confuses those around them, especially the lawyer, who wonders where Ma-ru's true loyalties lies. Whether he is supporting Yoon Ji-ai or still in love with Jae-hee. As days pass, Ma-ru realizes that merely following Yoon Ji-ai isn't enough. The danger is too great, prompting him to confront the lawyer directly in his office. He warns him to stay away from Yoon Ji-ai and urges him to turn himself in. However, the lawyer, with his ruthless nature, is unfazed by Ma-ru's threats and warns him not to overstep his boundaries. Ma-ru pulls out the recording given to him by Jun-hee, capturing incriminating conversations that could implicate him. Unbeknownst to Ma-ru, Jae-hee is stalking nearby and overhears the conversation, creating a dilemma for her. She finds herself torn between wanting to maintain control over the company and her desire to reconcile with Ma-ru. Meanwhile, the lawyer, aware of the threat Yoon Ji-ai poses to Jae-hee's standing, is determined to eliminate any risks to his control. Ma-ru aims to protect Yoon Ji-ai, encouraging Jae-hee to turn herself in to the police, believing that doing so will resolve their issues. Just as Ma-ru exits, he finds himself weak, leaning against a wall, barely managing to hold on until Jae-gil arrives to assist him. Ma-ru wakes up and with the doctor advising him that his chances of survival post-surgery are slim. At this moment, Jae-hee begins to waver in her resolve against turning herself in, reflecting her internal struggle as she grapples with her feelings for Ma-ru. When she learns of his deteriorating health, she immediately rushes to the hospital, where she unexpectedly crosses paths with Yoon Ji-ai. Despite their bad relationship, they are united in their concern for Ma-ru. Jae-hee reveals Ma-ru's deteriorating health condition to Yoon Ji-ai, prompting her to recall the bike accident. This moment of realization fills Yoon-ji with guilt, leaving her too ashamed to face Ma-ru. As she grapples with her emotions, she walks the streets, reminiscing about their shared moments, and tears begin to flow. Meanwhile, Jae-hee is equally distraught, feeling the weight of having hurt the one man who cared for her. But lawyer Kim is making his final preparations at this moment. He is determined to offer his last value for Jae-hee. Yoon-ji, unaware of all this, is slowly walking in this direction. When she sees Jae-hee's call, she immediately hangs up, not realizing it's a life-saving call. Perhaps if she had answered, the ending would have been completely different. At the same time, Ma-ru, who is at the hospital, hears from Jae-gil that Yoon-ji had just been there, so he rushes out, searching for her everywhere. In that moment, Yoon-ji also lets go of her hatred and, without hesitation, goes to find Ma-ru. Finally, the two meet at an intersection, walking toward each other, and everything seems so perfect. But behind Yoon-ji, Ma-ru suddenly notices a figure approaching. His mind goes blank in an instant, and he endures the pain, trying not to let Yoon-ji notice. "I'll answer you tomorrow," he told her, knowing that he couldn't hold on much longer. Ma-lu could only tell Yoon-ji that the most important answer would come tomorrow. After Yoon-ji left by car, Ma-ru finally couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed to the ground. He wanted to live for Yoon-ji, but his consciousness was gradually fading. Meanwhile, Jae-hee finally made up her mind and went to the police station to turn herself in. She wanted to clear Ma-ru's name and confessed all the wrongs she had committed over the years, as well as how Ma-ru had taken the blame for her. 10 years quickly passed. Ki married Jae-gil, and the family was living happily together. This day also marked the day that lawyer Jin was released from prison. From afar he saw Jae-hee waiting in the car, but this time lawyer Kim seemed to have let go of his obsession. The two didn't meet, and Jae-hee had only been released for 6 months. Having already resolved her regrets, it was time to start a new life. Meanwhile, in a remote mountain village, a doctor who had returned from the United States suddenly appeared. However, he had lost all his memories due to a surgery, except for the strong feelings he had for the girl in front of him. They both finally reunite after 10 years, marking the new phase of their new relationship. Thanks for watching. Please like and drop a heart if you like the story.